Bwong. Holy crap.
Hey everyone, this week's subject matter is the pawns from Dragon's Dogma and its expansion, Dark Arisen. We'll go over the pawns' function in-game, as well as the background of who and what they are.
So before we begin, we need to give a little bit of background information concerning the world of Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma is a high fantasy game set in a medieval-style world filled with monsters, mayhem, swords, and sorcery. However, the most important aspect of the world design for Dragon's Dogma, at least for the purposes of our topic, is the fact that Dragon's Dogma's world is part of a multiverse. Hundreds, if not thousands of worlds, all separated by an ethereal, nearly impenetrable barrier known as the Rift. The Rift is, in simplest terms, the space between worlds, and presumably its connective tissue, as pawns can pass through the Rift from one world to another. There are also a handful of locations experienced within the game that are either expressly stated or inferred to be within the Rift, including the pawn summoning area, the battle site for the legendary Dragon, and the site of the Dark Arisen DLC, Bitter Black Isle. The area wherein pawns are summoned is expressly a zone within the Rift, or at least a projected manifestation thereof. The Dragon Battle Arena and Bitter Black Isle are merely inferred to be within the Rift as a result of obviously multi-dimensional goings-on there.
So, a pawn is a seemingly human creature indistinguishable at first glance from any normal living man or woman. In fact, the only visible giveaway to a pawn's true nature is what is known as a pawn print. Yes, a dimly glowing sigil or scar on the palm of one of the pawn's hands, generally the right. This pawn print glows brightly in the presence of an Arisen, but as the player character within the Dragon's Dogma game is an Arisen, and thus all seen pawn prints glow, it is unknown whether or not the print always glows or merely looks like a brand or scar when purely in the presence of common folk. So, I hear you asking, what are pawns then, if they aren't merely mystically scarred or branded members of humanity? Well, a pawn is a being born with intelligence, personality, and various skills, like you or I, but no willpower or emotion of their own. As such, they are capable of speech, have inclinations, are more night owls or early birds, etc., but they don't generally have any particular drive to do this or accomplish that, and they won't be upset when unable to do task X or when they're forced to perform task Y. They will feed and care for themselves, defend themselves, but without a powerful will to govern them, they are little more than strange oddities seen on the streets or passed while wandering the wilds. They are empty vessels with but a single purpose. They are created to serve the will of an Arisen.
An Arisen is a normal human being with one particular characteristic that sets them apart from the common man. They have exceptionally strong willpower and a fierce drive to live, making them, in many ways, the antithesis of the pawns they control. For reasons not worth getting into here, every so often a powerful being known as the Great Dragon searches the land for men and women with the will to stand against any foe, and the drive to channel that will into overcoming any obstacle. Most often, those deemed worthy are folk, simple or highly skilled and trained, that are willing to fight the dragon itself, despite the odds being highly stacked against them. We're not talking about Soldier 47 out of 500 and an army sent to slay the dragon. We're talking the player character who's ready to charge into the dungeon, alone, sword gleaming in the torchlight, and rip the undead king who's reigned unchallenged for centuries off his throne, while shattering his forces because we're just that awesome. Upon selection, the Great Dragon magically removes the worthy candidate's heart, granting the candidate a measure of immortality, and a spiritual component marking them as the Arisen, denoted by a glowing scar where the heart was ripped from the Arisen's chest that glows in response to the pawn print of nearby pawns. Any pawn the Arisen encounters thereafter will know instantly that they gaze upon an Arisen and will be willing, even eager, to serve, acting as an Arisen's guide, mentor, loyal comrade, meat shield, or whatever else the Arisen needs.
The most surprising thing about pawns is perhaps the manner of their creation. If you've just played the game, then you may be unfamiliar with the nature of their genesis. Indeed, before research, Isaac and I had always assumed that, considering a pawn's nature, they are simply spawned within the Rift and are then called forward by a like-minded Arisen. You see, there are hundreds, even thousands, of pawns waiting in the Rift or wandering through the worlds of the multiverse. And each Arisen, early in his or her career, gains the service of a particularly loyal pawn, known in-game simply as the player's main pawn. The main pawn travels with the Arisen through thick and thin, and is the only pawn that cannot be sent back into the rift at the player's behest. However, as it turns out, according to the Dragon's Dogma digital comic, linked in the description, each and every pawn in existence was at one time created by an Arisen. In-game, the Arisen approaches a Riftstone, the only tangible gateway to the Rift itself in the various worlds of the multiverse, and a device only accessible to the Arisen or the pawns themselves. And then the player creates their main pawn. This even includes a series of questions that help determine a pawn's personality. It turns out that the same process occurs in-universe, albeit somewhat more organically, as Savan, the Arisen from the comic and the character you play in the tutorial section of the game, was instructed to create his own pawn, and while doing so found himself thinking of his fallen father, a beloved man and a great warrior. What pawn should step forward from the rift, newly minted by our new Arisen, but Sald, a pawn with all the skills of a sword and shield-bearing warrior, and an appearance strikingly similar to that of Savan's father. Just what Savan had been imagining when calling forth his main pawn.
Pawns have a special relationship with the Rift and the Arisen. They are created from some combination of the Rift and the Arisen's power, but they are also regenerated by the Rift and are seemingly the only beings that are truly capable of traveling through it. Again, during the digital comic, at one point, Savan sends his 2 tertiary pawns back into the Rift to rest up and replenish themselves before the confrontation with the Great Dragon. While perhaps overkill from a mechanical perspective, that is, in fact, an in-game truth as well. If the player stands close enough to a Riftstone, all of the pawns in the player's party will heal over time. Additionally, should the player enter the Rift area from whence pawns can be summoned, whether the player's current pawns are sent away or not, when the Rift is exited, all of the pawns in the party will be fully rejuvenated. Additionally, when a pawn falls in battle, they are generally able to be mystically revived by the Arisen with but a touch, as part of the bond between Arisen and pawn. However, in the event that a pawn is sent back to the Rift, most commonly by being intentionally sent away or left to die for too long, but more rarely being directly banished back to the Rift by a very small selection of enemies within the game. Any pawn so lost, including the player's main pawn, may be recalled to the world simply by visiting a Riftstone once more.
Pawns are seemingly truly immortal, inevitably sent back to the Rift to recover from fatal wounds, only to be called again by an Arisen or eventually one of the worlds of the multiverse. Hence our original presumption that pawns were simply born in the Rift on their own. It should also be noted that though pawns are the only beings that appear to be capable of direct traversal of the Rift, there are at least 2 other beings capable of affecting the multiverse through the Rift. As the god figure in the game's mythology, known as the Seneschal, do not look that character up if you want to avoid spoiling yourself for this game, is presumably capable of influencing all the worlds in creation, and the Ur-Dragon, a sort of quote-unquote secret super world boss of the game, simultaneously exists in every world at once, and is thus affected by all the worlds at once, as although the denizens of those worlds cannot interact with each other, they can all interact with the Ur-Dragon, and thus battle the mighty beast simultaneously.
The last important piece of information regarding the pawns of Dragon's Dogma is their collective capacity for evolution. While all pawns start as will-less, emotionless beings summoned forth by their Arisen, if the Arisen lives long enough, over the course of their travels together, the Arisen's main pawn will slowly become more and more like the Arisen him or herself, adopting the Arisen's personality traits, likes, dislikes, etc., and even going so far as to eventually physically transform into the Arisen's likeness, given enough time or the right circumstances. One character in-game termed this process to be called the bestowal of spirit. This process is completed when an Arisen dies, as upon the Arisen's death, a pawn who has become sufficiently similar to their Arisen will receive some portion, possibly all, of the fallen Arisen's soul, and at that point become fully human, complete with emotions, will, drive, and mortality. Alternatively, should a pawn's Arisen fall and for whatever reason the bestowal of spirit is not completed, the pawn is left to wander the multiverse alone. All pawns that have specifically been noted to have fallen masters in-game have either carried on in their master's footsteps, helping the fight against the dragon in some way, giving advice to the new Arisen or acting as vendors of unique goods, for example, or have become corrupted, lashing out at all around them, even and especially other Arisen. Sometimes even while confusedly begging the very Arisen they are battling to let them travel together. Such violent pawns can be slain like any other and disappear into the rift just like any other. One can only hope that time in the rift eventually cleanses them of their madness. But we have no way of being sure one way or the other.
And that's basically the pawns. Among the most well-designed AI partners and sidekicks we've encountered in any game, and the most loyal beings in all of Dragon's Dogma. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like, and if you have ideas for lore videos you'd like to see us do in the future, let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore or let's play, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
In the meantime, this has been Two Men and a Mic, signing off.
Hey guys, you can click the link in the left for our last lore video.
You can click the link on the right for our last Let's Play.
And right here in the middle, that orb, you can hit that to subscribe.
Also, ring the bell if you want to be notified when we post a new video.
This is Two Men and a Mic. Thanks for watching.